Hey, it is a Tiki Technical Tuesday. It's been a while. I know, I'm sorry, we've been busy. But hey, guess what? This episode, we are going to talk about the substance that makes the studio go slip. And it lives inside of the slip tank. This slip table is a Big Puddle slip table by Glazer Ceramics, and it is an all-in-one slip casting machine. It consists of a main tank that holds gallons and gallons and gallons of slip. It's got an electric mixing motor that will agitate this slip. You can mix it from scratch using this motor, and it wakes up the slip when you're ready to use it. There's a secondary pump on the side that sucks slip out of the main tank, up and around through this hose and out through the spigot, where it can pour into a mold. Once the mold is finished with your casting, you flip it over and you can drain it back into the main tank. It's like the slip circle of life. Good Lord, look how empty the slip tank is. It's time, folks, for you and me to make some fresh slip. To make slip, we need to look at the Slipcasting Bible. Now, this is not an actual book. This is a collection of things that I downloaded from the internet, helpful articles, recipes, all that kind of stuff. No, I'm not going to tell you how to make your own. That is up to you. The most important part of putting together a Slipcasting Bible is the research. So go out there and do it. Whew, okay, we have got 3 50-pound bags of Laguna white stoneware prepared slip. Now, this is a dry slip. It is a mineral or a collection of minerals that is actually scooped out of the earth. It's like dried mud. It's weird for me to think about it that way. And in fact, you'll see later in this video that sometimes when they scoop out the clay, we scoop out some other things as well. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's get our safety equipment on and start cooking it up. In addition to the slip itself, we're going to need the Slipcasting Bible. We're going to need some gloves for protection from chemicals. I use this as like a mortar for mashing chemicals down. A good respirator to keep your lungs nice and healthy. A variety of sizes of buckets. We're going to use a big mixing bucket and a scale, a very accurate scale. We're using the Laguna clay recipe for making the slip. Now, this is specific to the slip that we're making today. Your slip may not be Laguna clay, so find your own recipe to match your slip. Okay, folks, it is time to meet the very first ingredient that we're going to be adding to our slip mix, and that is water. We're going to be putting 7.5 gallons of H2O into the slip tank. Why do we add the water? Well, we want a liquid, and it's kind of hard to have a liquid without it. If we reduce the water content, we'd have just normal clay, like modeling clay, like you see people throwing with on a wheel. We need this stuff to flow, and that is why we are putting in a lot of H2O. Okay, the water is in the tank, and now it's time to add 2 guest stars, 2 special chemicals that are not present when they mine the clay body out of the earth, but they're essential to make the slip behave like we want it to behave. And the first special chemical guest star is barium carbonate. Barium carbonate is a fancy little crystal that helps out the slip. Now, I'm not going to tell you just how it does that until we get to the fancy chemical science stuff later on in this video. I will tell you that in this current state, it is very toxic, so I wear rubber gloves and am very careful when handling it at this stage. All right, the next chemical player to enter the arena is soda ash. Soda ash, also known as sodium carbonate, is also added to this little slip lineup because of what it does before firing. Now, again, I'll get into the science of what all these things are doing a little later, and keep in mind, I am not a scientist, so I will do my best. The soda ash tends to kind of be in these big clumps when you pour it out of the bag, so I like to take it and use this sculpting tool as a mortar to kind of mash up all those big chunks. You want to make sure this all dissolves evenly in the slip when we mix it, so I make sure all my particle sizes are very small before I add it to the tank. Last but not least, we have what I like to consider the plutonium of the slip making process, and that is Darvan 811. Now, Darvan 811 is a deflocculant. That is a fancy, sciencey word that means when you add it to a solution, it makes the particles repel each other and they stay up in suspension. I go really deep into this in the previous episode that we've done was a couple episodes back on how slip casting works, and I highly recommend you go back and watch that to understand what this Darvan is doing inside of the slip. It's critical, and it keeps you from having to add too much water. If we put too much water into here, sure, we'll make really flowy mud water, but it will not slip cast correctly. The key to slip casting is you want to use as little water as possible when making your clay, and this stuff makes it possible. The big deal is, though, if I put just a couple drops too much of this stuff, it does the opposite, and it makes what was a liquid slip turn into like gelatin. So it's critical that you use just the right amount. So when I mix a slip, I use just less than I think I'll need, and then I add bit by bit until the slip behaves correctly. We're starting with 2.5 ounces, and I'm going to add 2.5 ounces of water to this to thin it out a little. I don't like to add pure Darvan to the slip. I want to kind of ease it in. I don't like to shock the slip with this very powerful chemical. Okay, I've got the chemicals weighed out, and it's time to start mixing. I'm going to add some water to this, I'm going to put it into here, and we're going to start the motor, and that means two things. One, it's going to get extremely loud, and two, we're going to start adding the dry slip to the water, which is kind of a breathing hazard. You do not want to breathe in dry clay. It's just bad for your lungs. So I'm going to open up my windows, and I'm going to put on a respirator, so the rest of this video is probably going to be a lot of voiceover. Yeah. In addition to the respirator I'm wearing and the open windows, I do have a vacuum system set up that I've got over the tank here to catch any errant particles of clay in the air. Now, this is a special vacuum. You can't use just any shop vacuum for this. It is designed specifically for ultra small clay particles. And here it is. This is it, folks. We're adding the official final ingredient to the slip mix, and that is the ceramic clay itself. Clay is a natural soil that contains clay minerals, as well as a few other bonus minerals that tag along for the ride. In fact, spoiler, these bonus minerals are why we are adding the barium carbonate and the soda ash. So back to mixing. As you can see, I add the clay with a little scooper. I don't like to dump the whole bag in because it makes a lot of dust. And then I stir it around with my giant restaurant paddle to get this stuff properly hydrated. Hydration is the key. Once we had one bag in, it's time to add the other two bags, and it's just repeating the same thing that we did for the first bag. We scoop it on out, mix it in with the paddle, and then the trick is I will also be adding little bits of the Darvan, the deflocculant, because we're adding more and more clay to the same amount of water, so things will get thicker and thicker. Adding the deflocculant makes this thick clay flow like water. It's really magical to behold. And once again, you got to go back and watch the How Slipcasting Works video. Once I've got all three bags in, I then go and clean off all of the dry slip dust that I can find. I use a wet sponge so I don't stir up any more dust, and I get things nice and safely spick and span. Look at this. It's slip, everybody. Alrighty, well, we've got some slip, and it looks pretty darn good, but the eyes can be deceiving. We need to let that once dry clay body soak up this water overnight. And we also need to agitate it a little more. We're going to put this motor to the task and let it run for like another 45 minutes before I then let it soak overnight. And then, and only then, will we be able to test this slip to make sure it's okay. And we're going to use some fancy scientific words tomorrow morning like specific gravity, which I can't wait to talk about. But until then, let's put this slip back on the mixer, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Oh! And I want to add really quick, you can't really do this at home. I remember for a long time, before I had the slip table, I was using prepared slip. I would buy it pre-mixed from Laguna clay in 5-gallon buckets, and it worked great. And then my ceramic supplier said, hey, you can mix this at home, and it would be a lot cheaper. And he said I could just use like a little hand drill, like a little battery-powered drill to mix it. Not true. Don't try to do this at home unless you've got a massive industrial duty rated motor like this, because you need to agitate this slip for hours, and this stuff is thick, and you need a strong motor that will not burn out, and a little hand drill is not a strong motor like that. If you don't have one of these, just use the pre-mix slip. It works fantastic. It's already tested and balanced and perfect and ready to use, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. All right, anyway, that being said, see you guys tomorrow. All right, it is the next day. Specifically, it is the extremely hot afternoon on the next day. It's time to take a look and see how our slip has turned out. Whew, okay. It looks pretty good. I can tell you right off the bat, it has gelled, and that is because it is, ready for it, thixotropic. A thixotropic fluid is a fluid that will gel or stop flowing after a certain amount of time. Think about ketchup in a bottle. It's kind of hard to get out, but once you agitate it, as you see here, me agitating the slip, it becomes a liquid again. That's what slip does. It's thixotropic. So slip is thixotropic, and that's no big deal. In fact, we kind of count on the fact that it's going to gel, and that keeps everything in suspension. So overnight, it's gelled, it's fine, and as soon as we want to use it, we just mix it up for a while. I always like to let the slip warm up for a good 10 minutes of mixing before I pour it. Now, we can control how quickly it gels by the addition of that deflocculant. In this case, we're using the Darvan. Now, it's tricky. You want it to gel eventually, but you don't want it to gel too fast. Like I've set up slip before where I'll pour it into the mold and then it gels in like 15 minutes and then it's difficult to get back out of the mold. You got to kind of shake it and try to get it to liquefy again, then you can dump it out. So I want to make sure this stuff is going to eventually gel, that's fine, but I don't want it to gel in the space of say an hour. I want it to stay fluid for at least an hour or so before the gelling starts. So what I like to do is mix it and then I time it to see how quickly it gels. But we're not going to worry too much about gelling right now because the first thing we have to tackle is specific gravity. So specific gravity compares the weight of one thing to the weight of water. So it's like a ratio. So something with a specific gravity of 1.5 is 1.5 times heavier than water. Slip is weird. It looks like water, but it's actually quite heavy. We're looking for a specific gravity of 1.75 to 1.8, somewhere around that range. This is important. You use the specific gravity because if it's off from that, it lets us know that we either have too much water in the mix or too little water in the mix. So to calculate specific gravity, we weigh the empty syringe, well, it's got a little bit of slip in the tip, and then we go and we draw exactly 50 cc's, cubic centimeters, of slip into the syringe, and then we weigh that amount of slip. Okay, so our first weigh, we got 86 grams. We divide that by 50 for the 50 cc's, and that gives us 1.72. So we've got a specific gravity of 1.72. Now we're targeting 1.75, which means that I have just a teeny touch, maybe too much water in the slip. Is it so much that it's going to ruin it? No. And why isn't it correct? Well, because there was a bunch of slip scraps and stuff like that on the side, which got in there. So I kind of had to add a little more water because I knew that there was more material going in than just the 3 50-pound bags of slip. So it's close. It's relatively close. I'm not going to fudge with it. I'm not going to add any more water. I am going to do this weighing test 2 more times just to double check my accuracy. And this is a really quick and dirty kind of way to do it. If the numbers were way off, then I would want to do some more advanced ways to figure out the true specific gravity. But I'm happy with the current 1.72, and we'll just do a couple more quick tests to see if we are, that's the correct number. Got the same thing, so I think we're at 1.72. So I'm happy with the water levels that we have in the slip then. Specific gravity is okay. I'm going to take it. I like it. So the next thing that we want to address is the viscosity of the slip, how well it flows, and that's controlled entirely by the deflocculant. The more deflocculant you add, the more watery it gets. And I can tell you, it is already gelled sitting over there, so I know that we need more deflocculant. If you remember, when we mixed the slip, I put in less deflocculant than I thought we would need, because if you put in too much, you can never go back. So we're going to turn the mixer on, and I'm going to add just a little bit of deflocculant and see if I can get the viscosity up, the flow of the slip. The Darvan is so powerful, I add it in very small amounts. I will very, very carefully draw like 5 cubic centimeters out into the syringe and add that small amount to the slip. I add a little bit, and then I watch the slip. In fact, you can tell right away after I add this that it gets more watery. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but believe me, The pump motor is suddenly not working as hard. It's pretty magical. It's powerful stuff. All right, while the slip is mixing, I need to go on a little bit of a hunt. If you recall, I said that this slip is primarily made out of a clay that is actually scooped out of the earth. And most of the stuff in that bag is clay and the minerals that we want to use, but sometimes we get some unwelcome guests, and that is what we've got to go and look for today. And we're going to use this. It is a 30 mesh sieve, I don't know, but we're using it to catch lignite. Lignite is a fancy word for something you may have seen if you were a bad little boy or girl and Santa gave it to you in your stocking. That's right, it's coal. Now, coal may not sound too bad, but believe it or not, this is the very last thing you want to have embedded in your ceramics. Lignite will hang out in your ceramic piece. It'll flow with the slip into your ceramics, and it'll sit here, as you can see in this cross-section, within the slip. Now, when you fire it, it disappears. It burns away and leaves a void, which you think is fine when you cover it with glaze, until you fire that glaze, and it leaves a pinhole, the very worst thing to have in glaze finishes. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to back up, and I'm going to talk about all those other little additives that we put into the slip, because some of them help us battle these impurities that we scoop out of the earth. First up, barium carbonate. This stuff actually captures the salts and other little minerals that like to hang out with the clay body. These salts, if we didn't capture them, would kind of float to the surface of the fired clay and would really mess with our glazes. Soda ash does the same thing, but with lignite. It dissolves the lignite in the clay, but this only works with small pieces of lignite. The big pieces of lignite are up to us to capture. Now, the word capture sounds really fancy, and you might picture me with like nets and spears and stuff, but no, it's really just me standing here for 5 minutes, pumping the slip through the sieve. So we do this for 5 minutes, and then we take a look and see what we have caught. All right, well, you never really know what you're going to get when you go on a lignite safari. It is a naturally occurring mineral, and sometimes the seam of clay that they're mining to put into the bags that we just mixed has a lot of lignite in it, and sometimes it doesn't have any. Now, if you're using a prepared slip, like if you're using a pre-mixed slip, you're getting it in buckets. The nice thing is it's already balanced. The specific gravity is perfect. You don't have to worry about it. The amount of deflocculant is perfect. And it's already screened for impurities such as lignite, the thing we're looking for right now. They can do that when it's wet because they're going to do exactly what I'm doing right now. You just can't do that when it's in the dry state. Anyway, let's see if we caught anything. Not bad at all. Okay, we have got a little bit of lignite, and I mean a little bit. We've also got some organic material. It looks like little bits of sticks or grass. We have got some silica, sand, if you will, and it looks like a little piece of plastic. So let's scrape it out, get a close-up look, and then we're going to do this whole process again and compare it to see if we're actually straining more and more out of it. Let's take a look. Now that is the kind of pile of lignite I like to see for my very first 5-minute filtering cycle. This is small. This is barely anything. I mean, keep in mind there's 15 gallons of material in there, and this is all that we captured after 5 minutes of continuous pouring. So that's great. I've done this before and got like big chunks, like a bunch of nasty stuff, and sometimes I've done it and I've had even smaller amounts in this. Anyway, we're going to do it 2 more times. Hopefully we'll catch fewer and fewer material every time we do it, and then this slip will be just about ready to cast on Monday morning. Slightly smaller. You may not be able to see quite on the video, but the particles seem to be a little smaller and there's less organic matter. So we're heading in the right direction. We're heading in the right direction. But I'm still going to do it for 1 more 5-minute filtering. Okay, here we go. The final bit. There it is. Now, that is a small little pile of stuff. Considering this is capturing 5 minutes of filtering of slip. That's all we've got. It's like half the size of a pea. So very small. And especially when you think when I'm filling a mug, I only have the slip pump going into that mold for, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. So this is 5 minutes worth. I think we're good. I think this slip is plenty clean enough to actually start casting. So there you have it. We have made it from inside of the Earth's crust to the slip tank. We've made the magical mud that we call slip. And, it looks pretty good. I am going to test this throughout the rest of the day to see how the gel time is, and I might add some more of the deflocculant just to make sure that it doesn't gel too quickly. But overall, I'm happy with it. And I hope you've learned a little bit more about how ceramics are made. And I also want to make sure that you click subscribe if you're enjoying this. I feel silly doing the obligatory YouTube end of the video speech, but it means a lot. So if you haven't subscribed, please do, and click like. And if you've got any questions, please put them in the comment. Now, if you're asking, why don't I put my slip recipe in here? It's because it is for this specific Laguna slip that I'm using. It may not work for your slip. Follow the directions of whatever dry mix you're getting and do that. Follow them to the letter. If you're doing this for the first time, don't try to make 3 bags at once. Just make 1 bag. Good luck. I'm going to go wash my hand off.